Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to 123 Podcast, in which today with our special guest. Hey, thanks for having me. Today we will be talking about, with our guest, we'll be talking about the Galveston Storm, also known as the Great Storm of the 1900s, that almost destroyed the town. I don't want to say that because it's a little harsh, but it's basically what it did. It really just ravaged through the entire town of Galveston in Texas, and it changed the life of everything and everyone there as they knew it. So, Mike, why don't you tell us a bit more about it? Yeah, like I said, Mike, why don't you start us off, and why don't you show us how it impacted, for beginners, how did it impact the life of everyone that was living there? How did it change the way things were happened at Galveston, Texas? Yes, of course. Just one more time, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be able to be a part of this podcast. I've been watching it since I was a kid. But the Galveston Bay in Texas, so 123 years ago, basically, there was this huge storm. They were just really underprepared. It was a very, very touristic area. A lot of people would go, so that's why they didn't really give it a lot of importance. So obviously you would expect this to have a big change in the way people do things, because it wasn't the most touristic area after that. It kind of changed everything. The economy dropped. They went from being one of the biggest and largest economies in Texas and in the United States, and just basically plummeted. And I think they lost it to Chicago. Yeah, and there was 22,000 barrels of oil and refined fuels that were spilled into the Galveston Bay, and that obviously affected the environment a lot. We'll get a little bit into that later. Wow, 22,000 barrels of oil is just mind-boggling to me. I can't even believe that something like that would happen. But so what did they do to prevent that? Because I know Galveston is in a very weird spot geographically, if you know what I mean. So they're kind of more like prone to natural disasters occurring, if you know what I mean. What would they do to prevent that? What did they do? Diego, that's a really good question, because at first they weren't really doing anything until they knew. A lot of the times these storms don't really come without warning. It was actually a tropical storm that was coming through Florida, and they knew about it. They just didn't expect it's not going to happen to us. Nothing needs to be done. They knew it was coming, so they definitely could have taken some action. But after the storm, which it was devastating, 12,000 people lost their lives and several hundred thousands were injured. But after the storm, they had to increase basically the sea level, or I guess they tried to increase the elevation of the town so that it was, I believe, sorry, I had to fact check for a second, but yeah, they raised the town 8 feet above sea level because of how low it was. And obviously the town was only 9 feet above sea level. And if you can read here in the article that will be linked in the description of this podcast, obviously, this is a big deal because the water was a 15-foot storm surge, which basically for several minutes and everything, the town was completely underwater. And the water and winds were going up to like 145 miles an hour. So you can see why this really was the big disaster it was. Wow, so you're telling me they knew it was going to come and they really didn't do anything about it? Yeah, that's right. They didn't really do anything, which is, I guess they didn't really expect it to come because, like I said, it was a Florida thing. They didn't expect it to take the trajectory it did. But, after that, they realized that they couldn't just leave it because 12 years later, another storm hit them, but thanks to the precautionary methods they took from that storm, obviously, it wasn't nearly as bad. And obviously, it's all thanks to the great seawall, the Galveston Bay Wall that was built in the bay, obviously. It was of great help in stopping these storms from destroying everything the way they did originally, because its geographic location isn't the best, and it's really prone to disasters such as we've experienced 123 years ago in 1900s. Wow, that is all really interesting, Mike. I have one more question for you. So you mentioned the great environmental impact that this had for the town of Galveston and the economic impact. I want to backtrack a little bit back to that economic impact, but I want to ask you, how much did it really cost them to clean up after that storm? Because if it's that big of a magnitude and it really destroyed the entire island, how they knew it basically, how much did it really cost them to clean that up? Diego, it's really interesting that you asked that, because that was a really, really, really hard to find. That's real information is just really hard to find online because of how old it was. Obviously, there wasn't many sources to look back then. But according to Galveston History, which is an international museum built shortly after, it's an international online museum built shortly after the incident, and obviously when internet was a thing. It says that the cost of repair were estimated to be between 17 $130 million, which is just crazy. And that's what I mentioned earlier. It caused them to lose their status as one of the best economies in Texas and lost it to nearby states. But anyway, that will be all for today. Thank you so much for being here, Mike. It was a pleasure. Like he said at the beginning, there will be a link in the document for everyone watching at home. If you want to, learn more a little bit about this incident, there is a full report linked in the description with the QR code. And once again, you can find me at noreply.gmail.com on all social media, Instagram, Twitter. Don't forget to follow us on Patreon for special episodes every weekend, and everyone have a blessed day.